Hey guys. So our topic for today is, as you guys know, one of the tried and true tactics that we recommend for figuring out your rates, and rates are never easy. When we know that, we'll tell you that again and again, and it's not an exact science, but one of the tried and true tactics for figuring out your rates, your project rates, what you're going to charge, all that kind of thing, is to base it on how long a project is going to take you. Is to base it on how long a project will take you, how long it will take you to write it, how long it will take you to edit it, how long meetings will take you, all that kind of thing. And that is a pretty good tactic for making sure that you're being paid well, fairly for the work that you're going to do. However, of course, that begs the question of how long is it going to take me to do that?
One of the best ways to know, though, when you're first starting out, how long things are going to take you is when you are practicing writing copy, because as you all know, you need to practice to be able to know how to write copy, is to really time yourself to, as you're doing, practicing writing an email, put a timer on, pull up a spreadsheet and just start tracking everything for yourself. So you have a really good idea of how long things take. And then when you get feedback, if you're a CCA student, you're getting feedback in the group, account for that time. How long is it taking you to revise something? You might be very, very surprised that a short piece of copy ends up taking a lot longer than you think. And I think that's one of the big mistakes when you're starting out is you're like, oh, I'm not hitting my rate, so I should bump up my rate. It's like, well, no, you really need to bump up the amount of time you're budgeting for the project. That's where the disconnect happens. And I was just talking with one of our coaches too. And I think one of the things we sometimes forget to do is really budget for that revision stage, especially if you've had a few clients when you've just started out and maybe you've knocked it out of the park and they've had no revisions. It can be easy to fall into the trap of budgeting like, well, I'll only need a half an hour to revise, or, I'll only need an hour because it'll be small changes. Knowing that that's not always the case, and it's not always going to be the case, and budget that into your project price, especially as you get better and more skilled, because yes, you still might need that time, but also you don't want to penalize yourself and get rid of the revision, part of the quote just because you knocked it out of the park on the first draft.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I think too, if you're budgeting for, you need to be budgeting for that revision time, like we're saying, obviously. But it's almost kind of like, well, I knocked it out of the park, so I'm going to take it out of my quote going forward. To Kate's point, you're going to penalize yourself if you end up having to revise. But let's say that you don't end up having to revise. It's almost like then that time ends up being, first of all, it's not going to be a ton, but it'll end up being a little bit of a bonus for doing the work even better and faster initially. Because think of it this way, if you end up not having to revise the work ends up getting done a little bit faster. So that what would have been your revision time ends up kind of being, in a way, ends up being like a rush fee. Kind of a one way to look at it. But another way to look at it too is across the course of your career, across the course of working with multiple clients, if you are careful about factoring in how long things are going to take you and factoring in time for revisions and time for meetings and all that kind of stuff. Emails.
The longest time I did not budget for 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. And when I really sat down, do it starting right now and check in on yourself occasionally of where your time's going, because you'll start to notice, oh, here's this whole lump of time I didn't even account for. And those 5-minute emails start to add up.
Yeah. And I mean, you have to charge for those parts of the project because they're taking up, like Kate was saying, she wasn't thinking about emails, revisions, client meetings. You have to charge for those parts of the project because you're doing that work and because it's taking you away from other work that you could be doing. You are doing work in those hours. When someone says, oh, I want to be full-time, and full-time generally is understood to be 35 to 40 hours a week. However you want to work that out though is, maybe you want to work every day, but you only want to work for 5 hours every day, or you want to work, mornings and late at night because you have kids around during the day, whatever. Where was I going with that? Gee whiz, Kate, where was I going with that?
Accounting for time among the full time.
Um,
I assume you were going with that if it's 35 to 40 hours a week, it starts to 1 hour here, 2 hours there. They start to add up if you're not accounting for everything that's going on during that time, all the billable hours. Oh, go ahead.
yes. Well, what I was going to say is 35 to 40 hours a week is not all copywriting. And thank God it's not all copywriting. You know, and believe me, I love copywriting and have been doing it for a very long time. Will continue to do it for a very long time. But sitting down and writing is very mentally taxing. If any of us had to literally write for 30 to 40 hours a week, we'd lose our minds. We would just pass out on Friday night and then maybe get up again on Monday. So you have to make sure that you are financially accounting for the hours when you are not literally sitting down and writing, when you are brainstorming, or when you are meeting with clients, or when you are any of those kinds of things.
A discovery call. I think people think they can't charge for a discovery call. And yes, if it doesn't lead to client work with the client, sure, yeah, that's so it goes. Mm-hmm. But for the calls that do lead to work with a client, factor that time you just spent into your quote, because that's valuable time that you've just spent getting to know the client, ramping up on their work. Mm-hmm. If another client you had a discovery call with comes back down the line, make sure you're tracking all of the time. You know, if you have your pitching spreadsheet and you're tracking all the people you're meeting with, and put the time in there. So if they come back down the line, you're like, oh yeah, I already spent 45 minutes and I already have that boost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and you know, discovery calls are valuable for clients too. The whole thing about discovery calls is you are helping them uncover opportunities in their business. You are helping them dive in, and you may be asking them questions that they may have never asked themselves about their business. Where are the opportunities? What are the challenges? What are you hoping to get out of this? You know, some of the things that we may start to take for granted as we build up our businesses are not things that every business owner is thinking about, or even has the time to sit down and think about. So to take them through a discovery call and to ask them these questions about their business and about their target audience are really valuable for, not just for you to try to get work out of the client, but valuable for the client, and to help them identify key areas and opportunities and frustrations in their own businesses, whether they end up working with you or not. So that you absolutely should be factoring that into your project price. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where, you know, all of this time, if you really sit and look at it, as you should, like sit and track all of your time and where it's going, you'll start to realize that, no, you don't have to bump your rate up to like, oh, I need $100 an hour to hit my goals. You really need an accurate sense of the time and where that time's going.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's as we always say, you know, you figure out what your big goal is. Maybe you want to think in terms of yearly goals. Maybe this is the year you want to hit $50,000, or maybe this is the year you want to hit $75,000 or $100,000, depending on, you know, how much work you want to do and how long you've been doing it and all that kind of thing. But then work backwards. Okay, if you want to hit 50,000 by the end of the year, how much does that mean you need to hit each month? And then how much does that mean you need to hit each week? And then, okay, how many hours do you want to work? And I mean, and realistically too, not like I want to make $22,000 this week and I want to work 6 hours. Probably not. So be realistic about it. But within, it's not literally just writing hours. That should include any of your client time.
And don't stop the timer for bathroom and coffee breaks.
To Kate's point earlier too, don't stop it for answering a quick question from a client or anything like that. Stop it if you're working with a different client. Don't get that. But yeah, it's important. And especially this will all get easier the more that you do it. The more that you work on projects and the more that you work with clients, you get a better sense for how long it's going to take you to write things. And to Kate's point, the best place to start is when you're practicing. Take note of how long it takes you to do stuff so that you can factor it into your projects. But it'll get easier the more that you do it, and you'll get a better idea for how long revisions are going to take you, or how long your kickoff call, your input call is going to take. And frankly too, sometimes you'll get a sense for, this client is going to take a little extra work. I still want to work with them because I want to do this project, but I can tell this client is going to take a little extra work or a little extra hand-holding or what have you. Yeah.
The pain in the butt fact.
Yeah, there have definitely been clients that I have increased the rate a touch because, and they were fine with it. You know, they signed off on it, but I increased the rate because I knew that this client was going to be a pain in my rear end, and so they paid me for it. But they always say there's no exact science, but you better at it. You need to just practice.
And
yes.
And I want to add very quickly, you don't need fancy time tracking software. If that's something you want to use, if you want to, best, go for it. But really all you need, almost all our phones, unless you went back to, not having a cell phone or whatever, you probably have a timer on your cell phone that you can use, set it, have a spreadsheet, have it up just as a window. If you use Google Sheets, Excel doc, whatever, throw it in there as you go.
I just use a Word doc. I have a Word doc open. I save it so that it doesn't my computer doesn't close down and then I'm like, what happened? But I just do a Word doc, and every time I change an activity, like 10:45 did this, moved on to this 10:40. I have to recommend not handwriting it unless you are someone who has really fantastic handwriting. I have the handwriting of a serial killer, and if I take notes and then don't immediately transcribe them, I'll be like, from 10:45 to 11:15,
Well, I will say with the digital version, and maybe you can do this in Word, I don't know if you can, but I've just realized, and I know people are gonna be like, this is so dumb, but you can sum a column or a row in Excel. So if you are working with a client and you're adding hours each day by day by day by day, and then you need to invoice them for the total of hours, or you just want to know, okay, what was the total I ended up doing? Do that simple sum formula to be like, okay, here's the total. But then at least you can track it day by day, and you don't have to keep adding. You can just auto add the sum of the hours.
Yeah, that's true. Excel doc or a Google would be better than a Word doc. Okay, consider
at least you're doing it.
Doing it, but I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna try it with the sheets, or because you're right. All right, so thank you, Kate, for joining me.
Yeah.
And thank you, everyone else, for joining us. We hope this helped just a little bit.